Those running back start-sit decisions are not getting any easier, so let's go through every matchup and figure out what's what. In week 8, not a single team has a bye week, so you're going to have a lot more choices. Luckily, you got these guys. You don't have to think about it. These are the must starts. I'll start with Breece Hall, Kyron Williams, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Joe Mixon, and Jonathan Taylor if he returns. Before you start setting your fantasy lineup, you're going to get your picks in on Underdog. For some reason you haven't tried Underdog yet, go ahead and do it. Download the app, go to underdogfantasy.com, and you get this free pick as a new customer. Matthew Stafford just getting 1 yard on Thursday night against the Vikings. That's a free pick for you, but you have to sign up using code ENDGAME. That also gets you a deposit match with up to $1,000 worth of bonus cash just for signing up. So use code ENDGAME and check out Underdog Fantasy now. In that Thursday night matchup of the Vikings at the Rams, Kyron Williams, you got to start him. He just will not stop scoring touchdowns. But what about Aaron Jones in this road game?
You got to start Aaron Jones too. Came back from injury last week, looked great, handled pretty much all the work in this backfield, and now he gets this Rams defense. You got to start Aaron Jones. He's a very strong start this week.
We had right to be nervous about Aaron Jones last week because it wasn't even a sure thing he would play. They were like, we'll see. And he looked fine. He was a strong start. This Rams defense has just not been the same without Aaron Donald. So, yeah, I have no qualms. I feel he is a very strong start this week. So where does that leave Ty Chandler? Is he at least a flex option, or is this pure handcuff territory?
It looks like pure handcuff territory. 2 carries last week, no catches. Ty Chandler needs to be on your bench.
Agree. I mean, again, no teams on bye. You've got to be able to do better here. As Jones is healthy, Chandler is not startable. Then on Sunday morning, the Jaguars will be back in Florida. No more London for them. They get to face the Packers, though. So let's start with the Pack side. Josh Jacobs against this Jaguars defense. I'm thinking yes, please.
I'm definitely thinking yes. Finally caught a touchdown pass. All right, the streak is over, but he's been a workhorse running back all year. He's been good all year. He's just been lacking those touchdowns. Against the Jaguars, he's definitely a strong start this week.
Yeah, there have been some weeks he's really profiled more as just a solid player, more of a floor than a ceiling, but come on. Against the Jaguars, this game script should definitely be in their favor. Got to be a strong start. Now, what about Tank Bigsby? One of the best running backs from week 7. The worry is if Etienne is playing, but I actually don't even think that matters too much. I think I might have Tank Bigsby here as a strong start until further notice.
I'm not sure I can put him in the strong start tier because, yes, it's a good matchup against Green Bay, but it's not like a smash matchup, and there is a chance game script goes against them because this Green Bay offense could just roll the Jaguars. But I still have to put him as a solid start this week, even if Etienne plays.
That is a good point because the one thing that Tank hasn't really done too much of is catch passes because that role has actually gone to Dearness Johnson. So if Etienne is missing this game, which is possible still, is Dearness Johnson, at least a flex option?
He's a flex option in PPR leagues only because of that pass catching. And again, there is a chance here that they're behind and having to throw a lot. So a flex in PPR only.
Right, but I'm going to say desperation flex. Again, you should have more upside somewhere else on the waiver wire because let's face it, Dearness Johnson is probably on the waiver wire in most leagues, so a very low upside desperation flex. And what if Etienne does come back to throw a wrench in this whole operation? Is Etienne startable?
I don't think so. Coming off that hamstring injury, very risky here. I would prefer to bench him this week.
I would definitely keep him on the bench if I still have him because Tank has just been the better runner all season long. He's still going to retain, I think, the lead role here. So I'm going to say if you have Etienne, maybe don't drop him, but bench him. The Cardinals taking on the Dolphins in week 8. Let's start with James Conner. Undisputed bell cow there. Dolphins, not a very good run defense. Where do you put Conner?
I got to put Conner as a strong start this week going against this bottom 3, bottom 2 Miami Dolphins run defense. He's a workhorse. He catches passes. He's got touchdown upside. This week, James Conner is a strong start.
He's got to be. Even though, yes, this Dolphins offense should finally be able to score points, still, it's going to be easy sledding for him compared to especially facing the Chargers run defense in week 7 to the Dolphins in week 8. He's going to feel like it's practice. So, yeah, Conner, you got to roll him out there. Strong start. And the Dolphins side, what do we make of Devon Achane now with Tua presumably back in play? Does this mean he goes back to, at the very least, strong start territory, if not must start?
I'm not ready to put him quite there yet. This is a good matchup for the Dolphins running backs here, but we have seen Mostert getting more involved. We have seen Jalen Wright get a little more involved, but you got to feel good with Tua back. I'm going to put Achane in the solid start tier this week. That might be too low, but I'm just going to be a little more cautious this week.
I understand. I mean, this is one of those tricky situations where really it depends on your other options. If you have someone like, I don't know, James Conner, I probably would say I can go Connor over Achane, but I think he's bordering on almost a strong start. I guess let's wait and see it. So a very high-end, solid tier player for me. And what about Raheem Mostert in the same matchup?
I'm going to put Raheem Mostert in the flex starts. He could always score, but he's not really going to catch a lot of passes. We haven't seen those big plays from Raheem Mostert, but it is a good matchup. They will have Tua back, so I'm going to put him in the flex starts.
Yeah, this thing is, Achane is still the lead back, and he's been in that role really all season long, even when Mostert is healthy. I feel like Mostert is still kind of touchdown dependent. He hasn't really been scoring touchdowns, especially compared to last year. So I think a flex option with some limited upside. The Jets are going to take on the Patriots this week. Breece Hall, thankfully, still retaining that must-start tag. What about Ramondre Stevenson? Looking like a guy you don't really want in your lineup. Does he bounce back this week?
I think he can bounce back. This Jets run defense has not been very good. I know there is a chance to get Hassan Reddick back, but I mean, how many snaps is he really going to play first game back? I think Ramondre could be better this week. He should be healthier this week, but I still can only put him in the flex tier.
Agree. I don't feel like we can give up on Ramondre. Gotta think the injury limited him. Really, it's the offensive line, the lack of blocking that has limited him as well. I feel he gets better, but yeah, I can't put him at least even as far as a solid start. Flex, but he's probably going to be one of my favorite flex options among the running backs. Ravens taking on the Browns this week. Let's say Derrick Henry, still a must start. Justice Hill, I mean, he did score on Monday night, but still, is game script going to be in his favor this week?
That's the issue. That was a game that looked like a high-scoring, high-passing game, and it pretty much was. This does not seem that way against the Browns. He can always catch passes. He could always score. Desperation flex at best.
As long as King Henry is healthy, Justice Hill will never be more than a flex. So sure, you can. Just know that this is pure boom bust. And then a great story with Nick Chubb. I guess the one good thing coming out of Cleveland these days is Nick Chubb is back. He managed to find the end zone. Can he do it against this Ravens defense, though?
I mean, he always can, but man, they really... I mean, look, credit to the Browns. They got Nick Chubb a touchdown. They gave him like 4 straight carries at the goal line, hoping he would get in, and then they basically didn't give him the ball the rest of the game because they had already given him, I'm sure, more carries than they wanted. 22 rushing yards on 11 carries. You could flex Nick Chubb, but man, against the Ravens, you are just praying for a touchdown here, so desperation flex still.
For those who don't know, Ravens came into last week as the number 2 best run defense, meaning limiting running backs to the second fewest fantasy points per game. It's not a good spot. It's still going to take time for Chubb to work his way back. He wasn't efficient as a runner, so it's basically touchdown or bust again. So flex is as high as I'll go. Now this should be a good one. The Eagles at the Bengals. Saquon reasserted himself as one of the best backs in the league. Well, then they got the Bengals. Interesting mix of players. You don't know who to pick here, if anybody. Do you like Chase Brown in this matchup?
I can't say I like Chase Brown in this matchup, but I will say I prefer Chase Brown out of these 2 running backs. He got 15 carries, Zach Moss only 6 in that game, so it looks like he is taking over as the lead back. Receptions are pretty even, but this isn't a great matchup, and he's not completely taken over here, so Chase Brown only going to be a flex start.
If I had to pick one of these 2, which I'd rather not this week, I would say it's going to be Chase Brown, but flex is it because the Eagles are, to some extent, a pass funnel defense. Really feel like the Bengals are going to have to lean on their passing game. So Chase Brown is going to have to do some work as a receiver if he's going to get you fantasy points. Zach Moss, I can just straight up say, no, I'm sitting him. He's gotten worse as the season's gone on. He's been less involved, and it's not a good spot for him. So I'm just going to say avoid.
Yeah, I don't think I can go full avoid. I mean, if I'm going to say like Justice Hill and Nick Chubb are desperation flexes, I guess I got to say Zach Moss is a desperation touchdown-dependent flex as well because he could score.
Another good divisional matchup here with the Colts facing the Texans. Mixon has moved into the must-start category. Look, JT is if he plays, but let's brace ourselves in case he doesn't. If so, what are your thoughts on Trey Sermon here?
Can't feel good. I mean, Tyler Goodson severely outcarried him in that last game. Yeah, Trey Sermon, he is going to be on my avoid.
On the road against this Houston run defense, which is one of the better ones in the league, Sermon has let us down. I don't see why he would change it here, so I'll avoid Sermon. Tyler Goodson, do you feel better about him?
I certainly feel better about him. I mean, 14 carries to 8, but at the same time, I don't feel great about him. But I think Goodson in this matchup could at least be a flex.
I guess I can go to the flex level here for Goodson. I really don't want to play either of these Colts running backs if possible, but I guess Goodson does have a little bit more juice. He seems a little bit more explosive in the open field and get a little bit more work as a receiver lately. So low-end flex. Tennessee's going to travel to Ford Field and take on the Lions. Let's start with Tony Pollard. He's been solid, but can he do it against this Lions defense?
Yeah, coming off a bad game and a great matchup, now gets this Lions defense. I know Tony Pollard's been really good, and I know it's probably hard to bench Tony Pollard, and I'm not going to bench Tony Pollard, but man, in this matchup, upside might be very limited here. I can only put Tony Pollard in the flex starts this week.
Well, mentioned Baltimore, that super tough run defense is number 2. Detroit's number 3, third fewest fantasy points to running backs. This offense, yeah, they could definitely fall behind early against the Lions on the road. So although we can't put Tony Pollard too low, I feel like he's at least the low end of the solid tier. I will say this, right now, looking at the early lines and underdogs, 60.5 rushing yards. Yeah, Pollard's cleared that most games this year, but at Detroit, I think he might go lower. And I'm going to go and take that lower if I'm taking my early picks here in Underdog. If you haven't tried it yet, go ahead and check it out. Remember that free pick that you get, Matt Stafford just getting 1 yard, that's a freebie. You combine it with this pick or any other pick that you like, and you can win your very first entry. Again, try Underdog if you haven't yet. Just make sure that you use code ENDGAME when you check out. Now for the Lions, Mr. Reliable, David Montgomery, not so much in week 7. Left the game briefly and came back, due to injury, and then fumbled, basically giving the game away at the fourth quarter there. And we didn't see him the last couple of drives. So have you changed your thoughts about Monty for this week?
No, I don't feel like Dan Campbell's a vindictive coach who's going to bench David Montgomery just because of that fumble. They still won the game, so that was the good news. It's not the best matchup against the Titans, but the Titans are much better against the pass than the run. I still think David Montgomery is a strong start this week.
I mean, as long as he's good to go, and again, he did come back in the game, so the injury didn't seem to really matter. I don't think that caused the fumble. I think it was just a really good defensive play. He still has such an upside. He's still a solid start. Let's just call him a solid start. And it did work to the advantage of Jahmyr Gibbs with a pair of touchdowns. Do you think he sees a little bit more action in this game like he did, or not so much?
Maybe, maybe not, but I don't think it really matters. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs always has that home run potential, that pass catching potential. He's always going to be a strong start for me.
Only reason he's not a must start anymore is because Monty is still there and does take enough carries to sort of limit Gibbs' upside, but you saw what happened. Didn't affect him in week 7. Yeah, Gibbs is just a strong start, especially in a home game here against the Titans. Falcons taking on the Bucs, a rematch of week 5. Yeah, Bijan, this is why you don't ever consider sitting him. So what does this mean for Tyler Algier? As Bijan has taken over basically more of this backfield, is Algier becoming more of a fade?
He certainly is becoming more of a fade, and this isn't a great spot against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But at the same time, I'm going to put him in that same tier of guys. He could score. So if you really need him, which hopefully you don't this week, but you might, a desperation flex.
Exactly right. Desperation flex. And it's interesting that Bijan, now that he was finally not on the injury report at all for practice last week, having his best game yet. Yeah, Algier, still a stash, but not a start. Now it's time to talk about that Bucs backfield. Todd Bowles, he's a man of his word. This is pretty much a 3-headed monster here. So I guess let's start with Bucky Irving, who we were all excited about. How do you feel about him heading into this matchup?
I mean, you can't feel great here. This is truly a 3-headed committee, but he does catch some passes. He's looked pretty good. A flex, but barely.
Gotta be no higher than a flex option. He could make a big play. He could score on the ground, or he could just be a third of a mediocre running back committee. So flex if you need him. Rachaad White, I mean, for what it's worth, still seems to be the main pass catching back here. Is that enough to make him more than a flex?
No, not more than a flex. Same thing with Bucky. I mean, he catches passes at least. He's looked actually pretty good. So, again, just a flex.
Right, and it's not like the other running backs aren't catching passes at all. Bucky had a couple on Monday night. Yeah, flex in a PPR league. And then Sean Tucker, you put him at the same level or a bit lower?
I think you got to put him a bit lower because he's not catching passes. He's just, dependent on scoring a touchdown. And in a three-headed committee, I'm going to avoid Sean Tucker.
Wasn't crazy to pick him up, and this could wind up being a one-week wonder. You really shouldn't need a guy like Tucker this week, so unless you're in like a 16-team league or deeper, just avoid. The Saints definitely looking to bounce back after, a few disappointing losses in a row. Unfortunately, they get to go on the road against the Chargers and that top-ranked run defense, so could we consider not starting Alvin Kamara?
I don't think so. I know it's not feeling good right now, and if it's Spencer Rattler again, it's certainly not going to feel good, but I don't think I can bench Alvin Kamara. Obviously, we've taken him out of the must-start for now until Derek Carr is officially back, but I still have to consider Alvin Kamara a strong start.
I could consider it, but again, I mean, you've got to have a couple of running backs behind him who are really, really involved and talented and in good spots, but I'm going to put Kamara down to just the solid tier. Chargers have only given up 2 touchdowns to running backs, both on the ground and in the air all season long. This offense is a disaster. Rattler still starting. I just don't see the upside here, honestly, but at least he should catch some passes and give you a floor, which is why I'm saying solid. On the flip side, we got J.K. Dobbins against the Saints defense, which is now looking like the worst in the NFL. Is he a must start?
Well, obviously not because we didn't put him in the must start, but he's a definite strong start this week. I mean, he's the workhorse running back here. The Saints defense is an absolute mess. You've got to start Dobbins.
Well, that is true. We didn't say absolute must start, but he's as close as you can get. Very strong start. That Saints defense giving up 5.5 yards per carry. That's the most in the league. Dobbins, I mean, you got Dobbins. You want to put him in your lineup. Next up, we got the Bills at the Seahawks. James Cook was back. Scored a touchdown. Everything looking good in Buffalo. Where do you put James Cook this week?
I feel good about James Cook. I mean, he handled a huge share of the backfield touches. I mean, he didn't catch a pass, but they didn't really need to throw it to him. I'm not scared of this Seahawks run defense at all. I still think James Cook is a strong start.
It's funny because the knock on Cook, pre-draft is that Josh Allen vultures the touchdowns. James Cook only scored a couple of touchdowns all last year, and yet he keeps scoring touchdowns. Look, Cook is really solid, set and forget, but actually more than solid. I should say he's in the strong start tier. And I can't really think of a reason not to play Kenneth Walker on a weekly basis, but against this Bills run defense, which has not been good, man, I have to start Kenneth Walker this week.
Agree. I mean, maybe we should have put him in the no doubt must start, but I don't know if everybody feels that way about him yet, but he's definitely one of the strongest starts this week. You got to start him.
This should be an interesting matchup between the Bears and the Commanders. Chicago had the week off, but when we last saw them, DeAndre Swift was rolling. Can he do it on the road against the Commies?
I mean, maybe, but they've actually been better on defense recently. I wonder if Dan Quinn is working his magic here and getting this defense together. But Swift's still getting the touches. He's looked good. I'm going to put him in the solid start tier this week.
That feels about right. Again, this may not be the best matchup anymore for opposing offenses, but still, Swift has been pretty much the guy there, and he always has upside due to his pass catching role, so solid it is. And then Brian Robinson Jr. thankfully played, and it's a good thing because he had another very good game, scoring another touchdown. Against the Bears, you feel like he can do it again?
I think he can keep scoring touchdowns and looking pretty good. One thing about the Bears, they're a good defense, but they actually aren't great against the run, much better against the pass. So Brian Robinson, I don't feel as good about him this week, of course, because it's not the Panthers. But again, I still think he's a solid start.
Yeah, I think Robinson's going to continue to be at least solid every single week. Yeah, maybe not the best spot. What's curious here is, does Jaden Daniels play, and does that mean they run the ball more? Or does that mean the offense struggles with Marcus Mariota? So for that reason, just the unknown, I'll only put him at the solid tier. And then now the question goes to Austin Eckler. If JD is not able to start here, does that mean that Eckler goes up in value or down?
I don't think it really matters. I mean, last week I liked him because I thought, hey, it's the Panthers. He can do some damage here. But they did not need to even do anything last week, really, on offense. So this week, they'll probably need to do a little bit more. I think Austin Eckler's still a flex start.
Right. I don't know that this is a smash spot necessarily. I don't know that he's got a ton of upside, but he's always playable. So this week, flex feels about right. Now, the Chiefs taking on the Raiders, and all of a sudden, we have two teams that have new workhorse backs. That's right. It looks like Kareem Hunt is just it in the Kansas City backfield. He's been far better than we expected. Now against the Raiders, I mean, I guess he's going to have to be in some lineups everywhere.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be in the strong start tier for me. He's getting a ton of usage. They're running the ball at the goal line. He's got touchdown upside every week. He's got to be a strong start in this matchup against the Raiders.
And they just don't need to pass the ball, apparently, as strange as it sounds. This Chiefs defense has been so good. And come on, it's the Raiders. Kareem Hunt will be just fine. He's a strong start. And that's right, the Raiders have a workhorse. It's Alexander Mattison. Not what we expected before the season, but he gets the Chiefs on the other hand. What do you feel about him?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the Chiefs this week, but he's getting the volume. It's hard to bench a guy getting this kind of volume, catching passes. He could score, but because of the matchup, I can only put Alexander Mattison as a flex this week.
Exactly. And if you scoop Mattison off waivers, again, hopefully you're not relying on him. No teams on bye this week. Flex, but with upside. Panthers taking on the Broncos in Mile High. Chuba Hubbard continues to roll. Jonathan Brooks, not yet a factor, so do we keep rolling with Hubbard?
I think you have to. This isn't the greatest of matchups. The Broncos defense has actually been good this year, but still, Chuba's been rolling like you said. He always has touchdown upside. He catches passes. Let's hope Andy Dalton is better this week because he hasn't been good the last couple of weeks. I still think Chuba Hubbard is a solid start.
Well, you can't feel good about the Panthers in general and their passing game now, but, I'm not too worried about game script because the Broncos just don't score that many points. Hubbard will be involved. He's still a very solid start. And then Javonte Williams, coming off his best game, is he finally starting to, dare I say, break out?
He is, and now he gets the Panthers, the worst run defense in the NFL. I'm going to put Javonte Williams in the strong start tier this week. He got all the touches last week. He looked great. Audric Estime has somehow managed to fumble twice in 9 career carries in the NFL so far. This is going to be the Javonte Williams show once again. He's a strong start.
He's got to be. I'm still not completely sold in this Denver offense doing things consistently, but yeah, come on. Against the Panthers, you got Javonte. This is the time to utilize him. He's a strong start in Week 8. Cowboys at the Niners. Probably two of the more disappointing teams so far this year. Who gets right? Let's start with the Cowboys. Are they actually going to try to and be able to establish the run with Rico Dowdle?
They're going to try to. I don't know if they're going to be able to. Although I will say the 49ers run defense doesn't scare me. They're not terrible, but they're certainly not elite. But the Dallas run game definitely scares me. Dowdle does catch some passes, though, and he could always score. So I'll say he's a flex option this week.
Yeah, it's like I want to be higher on Rico, but man, we just see so much inconsistency from the Cowboys. And this spot on the road against the Niners, like you said, it's not a dominant defense this year, but it's enough to say Rico is just a flex. And for the Niners, Jordan Mason's still the guy, not coming off his best week, but he's still the guy at least.
Yeah, he's still the guy, and that was a very tough. I mean, that's the Chiefs. That shows you how good this Chiefs run defense is. The Cowboys run defense, not on the same level as the Chiefs. He got pretty much all the carries in this backfield, or at least the majority of them. Isaac Guerrero barely touched the ball for all those rumors that he was going to start. I think Jordan Mason against the Cowboys, especially with the Niners missing all their weapons, maybe they'll just lean on the running game more. I think he's a strong start.
That's a good point, too. Ayuk is out, and they should be able to run the ball pretty easily here. Hopefully a little bit healthier, a week removed from that injury. Let's call him a strong start once again. Then on Monday night, we're going to be treated to the Giants taking on the Steelers. Let's start with another newly founded committee. It's Devin Singletary and the rookie Tyrone Tracy. Let's start with Singletary. Was the starter no longer the starter? Can he start for fantasy teams anywhere?
I don't think so. Against the Steelers, they're splitting carries, splitting touches. This is a terrible matchup on the road. I'm not starting Singletary. He's an avoid.
Well, I'm going there because I did say on the cut list at the end of the waiver video, you don't have to cut him, but you can if you need the space. I'm definitely not starting him here. And then Tyron Tracy, I know he's been good, but he's also now sharing the backfield on the road against Pittsburgh. I'm not doing it.
I'm not doing it either. Like, he might catch some passes, but that's it. He's in a void.
What about Najee Harris? I mean, just when it looked like he was a guy that you might be able to move on from, he has bounced back with 2 good games against the Giants defense. What are you thinking?
I think I'm going to put him in the solid start tier. I mean, there is some risk here. He did split basically with Jaylen Warren in that last game, and if it wasn't for pretty much the garbagiest of garbage, I mean, how often does the running back for the team, destroying the other team, get a garbage time touchdown? But he got it, and it counts for fantasy. Without that, you're not getting a whole lot, but the matchup isn't terrible, so he's a solid start.
Yeah, it truly was a last-minute touchdown, but he was running well, and that was against a decent Jets defense. Against the Giants, gotta say, he's solid. Actually, I had to do double take to check. Pittsburgh, under Russell Wilson, scored 37 points. They may not do that again, but who knows? Let's just say if you got Najee, he's a solid option. Is Jaylen Warren becoming an option?
He's becoming an option, but a flex option for me because he's not the biggest dude. He's not going to get a lot of the goal line run like Najee will. He's more dependent on pass catching and those runs to the outside, but you can flex him.
I think he's now finally entered the flex radar, but on the lower end for me. Like you said, he's just not catching enough passes in this iteration of the Steelers offense, so I prefer not to, but if you need to, I guess you could flex him. Now you got the rundown on all the running backs you need to know about. What about wide receiver, quarterback, tight ends? Yeah, we got you covered. Check out this week's playlist for all the advice you need.